All right, strap in everyone, because we are about to tackle some seriously big stuff.
That's right, we're diving headfirst into the age of revolution.
Those moments in history where societies basically said, okay, we've had enough, and decided to rip up the rule book.
And we're not just talking about changing governments or redrawing maps, so that definitely happened. We're talking about revolutions that shook the foundations of how we live, how we work, even how we think, even today, centuries later.
Absolutely. And to really get a grip on all this, we've got a treasure trove of sources to dig into. I'm talking original writings from America's founding fathers, economic analyses of the Industrial Revolution, the whole shebang.
The goal here is to go beyond the surface level, beyond just dates and names, and really understand how these revolutions from way back when are still echoing in our world today.
That's right. So to set the stage, let's rewind back to, say, the 1700s. Paint us a picture. What was life like before all this revolutionary chaos broke loose?
Well, imagine a world where kings and queens ruled because they believed God literally put them in charge.
Oh, yeah, the whole divine right thing.
Exactly. And where the gap between the super rich and everyone else was like Grand Canyon sized.
You're talking like zero social mobility.
Basically, for most people, life was this constant grind just to survive.
Man, it's hard to even wrap your head around a world so different from ours today. But I guess back then, it felt like, well, that's just how things are, right? Like, this is the natural order and it'll never change.
I'm sure many felt that way. But then something remarkable happened. Ideas began to shift. This was the Age of Enlightenment, and thinkers like John Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, these guys started questioning the very core of power and authority.
And they were, like, seriously radical for their time.
Oh, absolutely. They were arguing that kings weren't anything special, just people with a job, that power should come from the people they govern.
It's wild how, like, the invention of the printing press suddenly gave everyone this megaphone, and these revolutionary ideas about individual liberty, self-government, they just exploded across the world.
It wasn't just the spread of information, either. The printing press itself, by making books and pamphlets more widely available, challenged the control of knowledge that had long been held by the elite, which is similar to how the internet democratized information in our own time.
Whoa, yeah, like suddenly people had access to knowledge that had been kept from them for centuries.
Exactly, and that shift is crucial for understanding how these revolutions gained traction. It's like people suddenly realized, hey, we can actually question the way things are.
So let's zero in on one of the most iconic revolutions of them all, the American Revolution. But it wasn't just about taxes, was it?
No, you hit the nail on the head. It was much deeper than that. These American colonists, they were deeply influenced by those Enlightenment ideas we were talking about.
They had tasted freedom, self-governance, and they weren't about to let a king thousands of miles away take that away.
Exactly. They saw the British crown as increasingly tyrannical, imposing taxes and laws without their consent.
It's like the Boston Tea Party, right? A pretty dramatic way of making your point.
Oh yeah, they weren't messing around. But here's the thing that always trips me up. Many of these revolutionaries, these guys fighting for freedom, they were slave owners.
Ah, yeah. How do you reconcile that with their whole fight for liberty and all men being created equal?
It's a really complex issue, and it highlights the contradictions that are often baked into revolutions. The American Revolution was a fight for their freedom, but it didn't instantly erase the deeply ingrained systems of oppression that existed.
So it was a revolution with a limited scope, at least initially. It makes you think about those unintended consequences, even when people are fighting for what seems like a just cause.
That's the thing about revolutions, they're rarely clean or simple. They often leave loose ends and unresolved issues that future generations have to grapple with. But back to America, let's talk about the Declaration of Independence. That document was basically a giant mic drop to the British monarchy.
Oh, yeah, they went there, declaring that all men are created equal, endowed with unalienable rights. That was radical.
It was a complete and utter rejection of the idea that rights came from a king or a government. They were saying those rights are inherent, given by a higher power.
It's like they were hacking the very concept of government, shifting power from rulers to the people.
Precisely. The Declaration of Independence wasn't just a list of complaints. It laid the foundation for a new kind of government, one based on the consent of the governed. And that idea, as radical as it was back then, has inspired movements for democracy and self-determination all over the world.
It's wild how these ideas, sparked centuries ago, are still shaping our world today.
It's proof that revolutions, for all their messiness and complexity, can truly change the course of history. But speaking of revolutionary ideas catching fire, let's hop across the Atlantic to France. Things were about to get a lot more, well, dramatic over there.
Oh yeah, France. They were about to have their own hold my beer moment.
France was basically a powder keg waiting to explode. The monarchy had been spending like crazy. The country was practically bankrupt.
And meanwhile, most people were struggling just to put food on the table.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was this massive disconnect between the rulers and the ruled. Resentment was simmering, and then boom, the Bastille falls.
1789, the year everything changed.
The storming of the Bastille was like this symbolic act of defiance, a giant middle finger to the old order. It's amazing how a single event can capture the hopes and frustrations of an entire nation, becoming this lightning rod for a movement.
And it's a good reminder that revolutions aren't just about fancy ideals and political theories. They're often driven by raw emotion, a desperate yearning for change. But what was the French vision of a better world? Were they aiming for the same kind of individual liberty as the Americans?
Well, the French Revolution had its own battle cry.
Yeah.
Liberté, égalité, fraternité, liberty, equality, fraternity.
Powerful stuff. So it was about dismantling that rigid social hierarchy, creating a society where it's not about who your parents are, but what you do, your talents and merit.
Exactly. They wanted a more just and equitable world where everyone had a fair shot.
But then there's that famous saying, the revolution devours its own children. Things got a little out of control, didn't they? Like a lot out of control.
The French Revolution was definitely a cautionary tale. Their pursuit of a better world led to some very dark chapters. The Reign of Terror, with its mass executions and political purges, showed just how easily revolutions can spiral into paranoia, violence, and the very tyranny they were trying to overthrow.
Yeah, that's a chilling reminder that power, even when it claims to be for the people, can corrupt. But let's shift gears now. Let's talk about another revolution. Maybe not as flashy or dramatic, but just as transformative. The Industrial Revolution.
Ah, yes. The revolution that reshaped how we work, how we live, how we interact with technology.
Okay, full disclosure, when I learned about the Industrial Revolution in school, it was all about steam engines and factories, not exactly the most exciting stuff.
I hear you. It can seem a bit dry on the surface. But the impact of the Industrial Revolution is still being felt today in every aspect of our lives.
Okay, so, color me intrigued. What makes this period so revolutionary? Sell me on the excitement.
Imagine a world where everything that used to be made by hand, one at a time, is suddenly being mass-produced in factories.
We're talking efficiency on a whole other level.
Exactly. New technologies were popping up left and right. Cities were exploding with people flocking to these new centers of industry, seeking opportunities. It was change at a pace never seen before in human history. A fundamental shift in the way people lived and worked.
Okay, I'm starting to see the revolution part now. But come on, there had to be downsides, right? Weren't the conditions in those early factories pretty brutal?
Unfortunately, yes. The Industrial Revolution, for all its progress, had a very dark side. Workers, even children, often toiled in dangerous conditions, long hours, for very little pay.
So not exactly the idyllic worker's paradise, more like a sweatshop.
It wasn't pretty. And it raises the question, right? In our pursuit of progress, do we sometimes lose sight of the human cost?
It's a question that still resonates today.
It definitely does. The Industrial Revolution, like all revolutions, was this tangled web of progress and exploitation, innovation and hardship. Its legacy is something we still grapple with today.
It's amazing to think how these events, centuries ago, are still so relevant to our world.
That's the power of revolutions. They leave their mark on everything that comes after.
Yeah.
But let's shift our focus now. We've talked about the context, the events, but what did a better world even mean to the people living through these times?
Right. Who were the people who dared to imagine something different?
And was it the same for everyone?
That's what I want to know. I guess we'll have to dive deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive. I'm ready when you are.
Wait, it's easy to get caught up in the grand sweep of history, talking about revolutions in these big abstract terms.
Right, like dates, battles, famous leaders.
Exactly. But we got to remember that revolutions are ultimately lived and experienced by real people.
It's one thing to read about taxation without representation in a textbook, but it's a whole other thing to try and imagine what it would have been like to actually be there.
To feel that frustration, that anger.
To be like a farmer in colonial America.
Yeah, work in your land, trying to provide for your family.
But also feeling the pressure of British rule tightening around you.
You're reading pamphlets, going to town meetings.
Hearing about these radical ideas of self-government, individual liberty.
And all the while, those new taxes and regulations are squeezing you even tighter.
And you start to see that the king, thousands of miles away, doesn't really get your life.
He's more interested in filling his treasury than understanding your struggles.
I bet there was some serious resentment brewing back then.
Oh, absolutely. Especially towards those wealthy merchants in the cities.
The ones who seem to be benefiting from the system.
So, for a lot of colonists, the decision to join the rebellion,
That wasn't an easy choice.
no, it would have meant risking everything.
Your farm, your livelihood, your family's safety.
There would have been arguments, debates within families, communities.
Some staying loyal to the crown, others taking up arms.
And don't forget, this was a time without instant communication.
Right, no internet, no phones.
News traveled slowly, mostly by word of mouth.
So rumors and anxieties would have spread like wildfire.
That uncertainty, the fear, it must have been palpable.
It's hard to grasp the courage it must have taken to stand up to an empire.
Knowing the odds were stacked against you.
And I imagine the French Revolution, that was just as intense, if not more so.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine being a peasant in France,
Struggling to feed your family.
while the aristocracy is living it up in Versailles.
You hear whispers of these new ideas.
Liberty, equality, fraternity.
And it's like a spark of hope, right? A belief that maybe things could be different.
But then that spark turns into a raging fire.
The Bastille falls, and suddenly the world is turning upside down.
Imagine that exhilaration.
But also the terror,
Crowds in the street.
the monarchy crumbling, the old order swept away.
But there's also violence, fear of retribution, uncertainty about the future.
I mean, the French Revolution was like a roller coaster of emotions and events.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if the people caught in the chaos ever had a moment to breathe.
To ask themselves, is this really what we wanted?
Is this really the better world we were fighting for?
Especially when it descended into the reign of terror?
Neighbor turning against neighbor, the line between liberator and oppressor blurred.
It must have been disillusioning for a lot of people.
It definitely shows how even revolutions fought for noble causes can go off the rails.
That power can corrupt, even with the best intentions.
And that the path to a better world, it's rarely straightforward.
It's usually messy, unpredictable.
Now, let's step into a different kind of revolution. The Industrial Revolution.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine leaving your rural village.
Arriving in a bustling city, drawn by the promise of work in those new factories.
It must have been like entering a different universe.
Yeah, instead of the rhythms of nature, it's the constant clang of machinery.
Instead of open fields, it's crowded tenements and smoke-filled skies.
You're working alongside people from all walks of life.
Facing long hours, grueling conditions.
But there's also this sense of opportunity, of being part of something new and transformative.
Right, the world is speeding up.
And you're either keeping pace or getting left behind.
Exactly. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about technology.
It was a social and cultural earthquake.
A complete reordering of life as people knew it.
Some prospered, while others struggled just to survive.
It makes you think about the trade-offs we make in the name of progress.
And appreciate the struggles of those who fought for better working conditions.
For fairer wages, a more just society.
It's crucial to remember that the Industrial Revolution wasn't just about factories and machines.
It was about people.
Their resilience, their adaptability.
Their determination to create a better future for themselves and their children.
Okay, so we've explored these revolutions from the perspective of everyday people.
Their hopes, their fears.
But I'm also curious about the leaders, the visionaries.
The ones who dare to imagine a different world.
What did a better world look like to them?
Let's try to get inside their heads.
To understand their motivations, their goals.
And maybe, in doing so, we can glean some insights into our own aspirations for a better future.
Sounds like a perfect way to wrap up our deep dive. Let's do it. Okay, so we've been on this whirlwind tour through these massive historical upheavals.
From America's fight for independence to France's dramatic revolution.
And the mind-blowing transformation of the Industrial Revolution.
We've seen the struggle, the chaos, but also that incredible resilience.
And the hope that fueled these revolutions.
Yeah, it's inspiring stuff.
But now I'm really curious, what did a better world even mean to the people fighting for it? Was it the same for everyone?
That's where it gets interesting. The concept of a better world was as diverse as the people fighting for it.
Okay, so let's break it down. Let's start with the American Revolution. Who are the visionaries behind this radical break from the old world?
Well, you can't talk about the American Revolution without talking about the Founding Fathers.
Right, the big names.
Figures like Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams.
These guys were like rock stars back then.
They were men deeply steeped in those Enlightenment ideals.
The power of reason, natural rights, all that stuff.
Exactly. So for them, it wasn't just about kicking out the British.
It was about building a whole new system.
A system based on individual liberty and self-government.
It's like they were creating this blueprint for a user-generated government centuries before the internet.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
But of course, we got to acknowledge the elephant in the room.
All men are created equal.
Didn't exactly apply to everyone back then.
That's the dark side of the American Revolution.
It was a huge leap forward for democratic ideals, but it was also built on slavery and inequality. Well, yeah, it's tough to reconcile those two things.
It really highlights the complexities and contradictions of revolutions.
So it was a step towards a more just world, but with some serious blind spots.
It makes you wonder, did those contradictions bother the Founding Fathers? Did they ever grapple with the hypocrisy?
Like fighting for freedom while denying it to others?
Well, there's evidence that some, like Jefferson, were torn about slavery.
They saw the injustice, but they were also products of their time.
Exactly. They made compromises that had lasting consequences.
It's a reminder that even revolutions born of noble ideals are often messy and imperfect.
They plant seeds for change, but the struggle continues.
Okay, so now, what about France? What was their vision?
Well, the French Revolution was driven by that cry of liberté, égalité, fraternité.
Liberty, equality, fraternity. Powerful stuff.
They wanted to tear down that old feudal system where your birth determined your worth.
It's like they were saying, screw the aristocracy, we all deserve a shot.
They envisioned a world where individual merit and talent mattered more than your family name.
It was a radical vision, aiming for a truly level playing field. But things got a little bloody, didn't they?
Yeah, the French Revolution took a dark turn.
That reign of terror, the guillotine, yikes.
The revolution, in a way, became a victim of its own intensity.
It's like that saying, the revolution devours its own children.
Yeah, it's a chilling reminder that the pursuit of a better world can have unintended consequences.
It's a reminder that power can corrupt.
And that even with the best intentions, revolutions can go astray.
Okay, so let's switch gears again. Let's talk about the Industrial Revolution. What did a better world look like in that context? Less about political systems, more about technology and society, right?
Right. The Industrial Revolution was all about progress.
Innovation. The power of human ingenuity.
Think about it. Mass production meant goods that were once luxury items became affordable for everyone.
Right. Suddenly, everyone could have things that only the wealthy could afford before.
Exactly. New technologies led to improvements in transportation, communication, medicine. The world was becoming more connected, efficient, full of possibilities.
It's like the pace of life accelerated exponentially.
It really did. But of course, we can't ignore the downsides.
Those early factories with their grueling conditions, child labor.
Yeah, the human cost of progress.
It's like this constant tension between the shiny promise of a better future and the dark reality of how we get there.
And it's tension that's still with us today.
I mean, think about the debates around automation, AI, and the impact on jobs.
Are we creating a better world, or are we creating new problems? It's a question we're still grappling with.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it seems like these revolutions, even though they happened centuries ago, have some surprising connections.
They're all driven by this fundamental desire for a better world.
This willingness to challenge the status quo, even when it's risky.
And they remind us that the pursuit of a better world is never really finished.
It's an ongoing process.
A relay race where each generation passes the torch to the next.
It's like we're standing on the shoulders of those who came before us.
Those who dared to dream of something different.
And fought to make those dreams a reality.
So, as we look back on these revolutions, we're also challenged to look forward.
To ask ourselves, what does a better world look like to us?
What injustices do we need to confront?
What kind of future do we want to create?
Those are the questions we need to keep asking.
And that's a great place to leave our listeners, I think.
I agree.
So, to everyone listening, as you go about your day, think about this. What revolutions are happening right now? What role will you play in shaping the world to come?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the age of revolution.
It's been a wild ride.
And remember, the fight for a better world is never truly over.
It's up to all of us to carry the torch forward.